can we manifest bringing someone back from the dead? I mean, if you got into manifestation, it is a big question. If there are multiple timelines, that should be possible, right? And in my opinion, the answer would be yes in theory, but it would not be easy to actually achieve. If it's possible, I do think it is possible. And we do have one very famous example for example, you know maybe about the Mandela effect. Many people saw on the news that Nelson Mandela died. They saw the funeral, they could recollect what people wore, what speeches were given, and all of those people seem to recollect the same memories. But Nelson Mandela did not die in jail. He actually, I think he died of old age years later. So there is a memory of many people of something that did not happen. And how can that happen? And the theory is that those people changed to another timeline, the one we are in right now. And in this timeline, Nelson Mandela did not die in jail. However, there are timelines where that did happen. And some people have that recollection. So we actually can shift to a timeline where something that has happened in one timeline did not happen in the other one, even if it's something as sincere as death. And maybe you've had situations in your life where you almost died. It could be anything. Maybe you crossed the street and that car stopped right before it hit you, or you did have an accident and you survived, or maybe someday you choked on your dinner and could spit it out somehow. It could be anything. And if there is the imagination, if you thought, oh my god, I could have died, then most likely in one timeline you did, but you did not experience that specific timeline. Instead, you changed onto the timeline you're on now, where you're still alive. And that would happen with many people in your life, that in some timelines they're no longer alive, but in your timeline they are. Or in your timeline some people are dead, but in other timelines they still are alive. So when we can change timelines, it in theory should be possible to change to a timeline where a beloved person is still alive. However, it is problematic because when we manifest, when we learn about manifestation, we learn that we basically reprogram our subconscious. And there's some beliefs that are just deeper stuck than others. I always think when we are born, it is like there is this, like a computer program. We do have different beliefs, but different energies, and some could be energies like deep-rooted belief systems, like codes that were written. One example I like to give is, think of little turtles, water turtles. Yeah, that's turtles, right? When they live on land, they're called tortoises. But turtles, when they're born, they immediately know to get into the ocean. It's a program, it's instinct, it's in their DNA. And we do have the same. We do have some things encoded into our DNA that is just human instinct. And one of those things would be, we know that we die someday. And we have seen people die, we have heard of people die, we've maybe had pets that died. So death, even if when you're a little child, you maybe not consciously think about death, but still it is something that is very much encoded in the matrix, you could say. And then of course there's other codes we have. Some are also in our DNA because they are generational codes. For example, it is proven that if one person as a child suffers from trauma or from violence, it does change the DNA and is encoded in the DNA. And you probably heard that people who used to be victims turn into perpetrators. Why? Because it's part of the DNA, and this is also one of the reasons why many spiritual people are born into very problematic families, in order to break that habit, in order to break that cycle, so to not pass that kind of energy on. In other words, you could also say, when you're children, you are raised by your parents, even if nothing severe happens, but we do take on belief systems from our parents, our grandparents, the ones who raise us. So this is like the second layer. The first layer is, you could say, what does it mean to be a human? You know, like the turtle that is getting into the sea, and we have programs like at a certain age, we start to crawl, then we start to walk, then we start to use the bathroom, and it's often around the same age that children learn to speak. Of course, there can be differences. For example, if one child is completely neglected, it would learn it on later on, but usually it's about the same age because it is encoded. It is part of the matrix that we are all connected to. And then we do have the generational stuff that is one layer above that, and that would be assumptions we learn as children, the opinions we learn, the belief systems we learn, and we adapt, you could say. And then, of course, beside those imprints, we have our own belief systems. We make our own experiences, and not just that. We're not just a sum of our experiences. We are also encoded in a certain way. We are connected to different archetypes. And one example would be astrology. You know, you cannot say, for example, I'm a Virgo sun. All Virgo suns are the same. It's just one archetype, but I'm connected to other archetypes as well. You know, like I'm an Aqua Moon, which is very strong, or Aquarius midheaven, Gemini rising, hence I'm talking with my hands. That's something Gemini rising people like to do. And so we are connected to different archetypes, and we have different energies that are more individual, that are not as much as coming from our family. However, I mentioned that in one of the astrology videos I did, often we are born into families where archetypes like astrology signs are more prominent. So if you, for example, I'm a Virgo and Aquarius moon, and my mom is an Aquarius sun, Virgo moon, and my grandma was a Virgo, so there's often the energy repeats itself. However, we are individual as well. So again, we have encoded things, energies about in the matrix, like the computer program. What does it mean to be a human? And that is very much in the subconscious, very, very much in the subconscious. Then we do have, I think, in the unconscious, which is even deeper. In the subconscious, you have more things we picked up as children, we took on from our family. And then, of course, also in the subconscious, our own beliefs that we did have as children, or things we picked up, and even as adults, we do form our own beliefs. But the problem is, death is something that would be in the deepest layer. That is something that would be a very unconscious belief. So when we manifest, what we can do is we change those programs. And there are people who are known to change, for example, their looks, the color of their eyes. That is something that is absolutely possible with manifestation. If you change your belief system, which already is one that is pretty deep, that is going pretty deep. Other belief systems are more easy, like I can gain or lose weight, I can sunbathe and change, at least to a certain extent, the color of my skin. So some beliefs that we can change our appearance, of course, or build up muscles, those are very evident. But others go a bit deeper, you know, like changing the eye color, because you learned you can't do that, yet there are people who could do that. And in theory, many things that we believe are not possible are somewhat possible, and I have to think about the Matrix films that I just recently saw, because the new one's coming out and I wanted to watch the old ones before I see the new one. And in those movies, they can do things that are not now. For example, there's Neo, who can move at very fast speed, for example, or experience time a bit different. You know that scene, if you've seen a movie where he got shot at and he can kind of stop the bullets and make everything move in slow motion. So there are things that we can do to really rewrite programs. One program would be, for example, one big belief system is connected to weight. You know, people are born, for example, into family where everybody is a big, and they have the belief system, it's so hard to lose weight. And other people don't have that belief system, and they can practically eat whatever they want and they do not gain weight. So our belief systems play a major role when it comes to pretty much everything. And that person who, for example, grew up in the family where everybody was overweight can learn, they can reprogram their mind to believing that they have a very healthy metabolism, for example, and then losing weight without doing anything except for doing the manifestation work. If you're wondering why I'm talking about this, it's because the concept of death is, again, very deeply rooted in the subconscious, very deeply rooted. So you could technically reprogram yourself in believing that this beloved person did not die, because in some timeline they still are alive. But it would honestly take a while to reprogram your mind that you believe in manifestation so much that you can make that kind of jump. Would it be possibly? In theory, absolutely. Everything you can imagine would be possible, but in order to shift to a different timeline, we do have to reprogram our mind. And it is way easier to reprogram our mind. Oh, it's easy to lose weight without doing anything, because there are people who have done it. And it's maybe a bit harder to reprogram your mind, like, yeah, I can change my eye color without wearing contacts, just naturally, like completely change it. But bring someone back from the death. The thing is, when we connect a deep emotion and trauma, loss, it can be an extreme emotion. We've already put a lot of energy in the fact, I'm saying fact in quotation marks, in the fact of that person being dead, not being alive anymore. And it would be loaded with emotion way more than, I don't like my eye color and I want to change my eye color. So to do on that something that is so heavily loaded with emotion, I think it would honestly take a while, because you would have to learn about manifestation first to get to a state where you are 100% sure you can do it. Why 100%? Because it is so deep in the unconscious. The concept of death, that immense loss, that immense grief and pain is so deep rooted in the subconscious that you would have to dig many levels in order to get there. And that is why I believe, yeah, in theory it's possible, but to actually do it, it will require a lot of work, and to really 100% strengthen your belief that it is possible, because that is what you would need for something this. You would have to override a massive program in your subconscious. It's not a little thing. Easier programs, they're easy to change, but that would be a massive thing. And also, I think once you are near to that point where you could maybe get that timeline shift, you've probably already got so used to them not being alive anymore that is like a new belief system, that a lot of focus went to the fact that they're not there anymore. And again, that is a new belief that would need to be overrun, because you have to absolutely feel your person being there. It's like trying to manifest someone you love that is still alive but you're in separation. You have to really step into that energy of that person being there for them to come into your life. And with somebody who's gone, you could say permanently, like that, it would not be easy to reprogram your mind. Possible, again, I think so, because if it were not possible, it would somehow define, it would disprove manifestation, because according to manifestation, everything you can imagine exists in this timeline. You cannot imagine in this multiverse. I mean, you cannot imagine something that does not exist in this multiverse. So if you can imagine, for example, I know this is an awful example, but for example, you're a mother and your child died young, but you could always imagine going to your kid's wedding day, and you could imagine it very vividly, then only because that timeline did exist. Meaning, since there is no time, that in this multiverse there is this timeline where this person is still alive and will experience that wedding that you were able to imagine. So again, according to the law of assumption, it must be possible, but you have to recreate your entire assumptions around death, around that person being gone. And again, it's like a massive program in your subconscious to override. However, and this may be some condolence to you, this is one of the downloads I got from Spirit. When you can vividly imagine something, for example, again, you're unfortunately in this lifetime deceased child, if you can vividly imagine their wedding day, or you can vividly, like, all of a sudden you sit on the couch and you feel their energy and you just think about cuddling with them, then only because this timeline exists and there is another version of you in the multiverse experiencing that in that moment. And so maybe that can be a bit condolence, that when you feel the essence of your person, what, even if they are if you're in separation, like a divine counterpart or something like that, if you feel the essence of your person, then that's because in that moment you're close to a timeline where they still are. And you know, the veil is very thin in that moment, and it's not that you're talking to them on some other side. They are there, and maybe that can give you some condolence that maybe in this timeline you are on right now, they may not be there physically, but they're not completely dead. There are timelines where they still exist, they still are, as long as you can imagine being with them, they are. And if you vividly imagine being with them, then you are actually tapping in that moment into a timeline where they are, and you do talk to them, you do cuddle with them, and or whatever you want to do with them, talk to them, and you can connect to their energy. So even if you cannot grasp it, experience it in the physical, in the, some people say 3D, or I want to say in this moment, in this specific timeline, you can tap into another timeline, at least energetically, even if you cannot manage to completely jump with your body into that specific timeline. I also want to add that when I did a lot of research on that topic, it's probably like 1.5 years ago, about glitches in the matrix, manifestation, different timelines, timeline jumping. I've read some posts in the internet, and I always have to say, like, one of the very first things I learned at the university, don't take everything for granted. You don't know who's writing those posts. You know, could be people making things up. You don't know if it's a reliable source or not. So take that with a grain of salt. But I've read posts about people, one person basically dying, experiencing himself dying, and then all of a sudden that ended, and he was not, I think he fell on train tracks. He was not on train tracks anymore. He was like right beside it, like in one snap from one position to the other. So I believe he did switch timelines in that moment. In one he died, but his soul was like, no, I'm not ready. In that moment he chose another timeline and made that jump. Or about one guy, I think it was a guy, I don't remember exactly, who was told that his, I think his aunt, he was not very close to her, but he heard that his aunt died, and his mom told him his aunt died. And he said a couple of weeks later, his mom was like, "Oh, our aunt is coming to visit." It's like, oh my god, the zombie apocalypse is real. She's coming back from the dead. And he was like, "Wait, I think she died." And your mom was like, "What are you talking about? She didn't die. What's going on? What's in your head?" And he was like, "No, I was 100% convinced that my mom, she was crying. She told me that my aunt died, and all of a sudden she's coming over to visit, and my mom couldn't even remember her dying. Like, what the hell is going on there?" Again, take it with a grain of salt. We don't know if it was just somebody who thought, "Oh, I'm going to one of those pages and I write some science fiction where people share their timeline stories." It was not presented as stories. It was presented as people really experiencing glitches in the matrix, timeline jumps, things like that. By the way, I'm also going to make a video someday about how, things I experienced when I jumped timelines and there were like glitches in the matrix. Nothing as severe as somebody coming back from the dead. But if we take this for granted and that actually happened and a person experienced somebody dying and then being there again, it is possible. But the thing is, that person wrote that they were not very close to their aunt, meaning there was not a lot of grief going on. It was like, "Oh, too bad," and then just, not giving too much energy into it. The more energy you put into something, the harder it will be to undo it, to revise it. You probably heard of the revision technique by Neville Goddard. If not, I would suggest to you to type in YouTube revision Neville Goddard and you will find some amazing videos who explain that to you. But again, if you've experienced a great loss, just because it's possible doesn't make it very likely, in my opinion, because I can only repeat myself, it is a major program you would have to rewrite. So yeah, I hope nevertheless this does answer your question. Can you manifest somebody coming back from the dead, somebody who passed on? I think absolutely. If the law of assumption is real, if you want to hold on to that, if you believe in that, then it must be possible. There's no other way than it must be in theory. However, to change timelines, to change our experience, we have to consciously, actively reprogram our belief systems, and the more on the surface they are, the easier it is. The more they are in the subconscious, the harder it is. Again, it's like a computer program. That would be part of that program that you already get your computer with. It's nothing you download and you can delete and there's an update. It really would be the software that's already installed on your computer, and to reprogram that, it would be hard, but in my opinion, in theory, it would be possible. So if this helped you in any way, please, you know the drill, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon. It is a new channel. Please help me grow my channel.